Here's the question that I get most often. It's not, how do I write a book? It's not, how do I get an agent? It's not, how do I find an editor? It's not, what is a good character development? It is, why can't this be easier? Why can't this writing a book thing be more simple? Writing a book is one of those things that about 80-something% of people say that they want to do, yet you know as well as I do that a very small percentage of those people ever actually gets there. And why is it? Because writing a book is hard. Does it need to be hard? Well, it does have a lot of moving parts. There are some ways that we can simplify this, other ways that we can't. But the thing is, so many of these smart authors that I encounter in my journey as a writing coach, they complicate things for themselves. So this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast is all about keeping it simple. Keep it simple, silly is what I'm calling it, because you're not stupid, but you tend to complicate things for yourself, whether it's with your plot, with your character development, with how to motivate yourself, with how to market yourself. You overthink these things and it makes you delay your eventual writing success. My job as a writing coach is to make you succeed, to make you finish your book, to make you be able to get your book edited, published, and marketed and sold so that you can write the next one and the next one after that. Because so many of us writers, we just dream of the day that we can have our book not only be read by a reader, but also write the next one and the next one and actually make this thing into a career. Some of us are amateurs, and even then, if you love it, you want it to be easy. Why can't I do this thing I love without getting stuck left, right, and center, hitting resistance? Today, we're talking about that. Keep it simple, silly. All of my 3 writing clients, my 3 authors that we're talking to today, they had issues with complicating things for themselves and it blocked them. So you're going to learn from their mistakes. I helped each of these writing clients to fix what was ailing them, and it was simpler than they thought. So let's get you unstuck on this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast.
If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation.
Hello and welcome back to the How to Be an Author podcast. I am writing coach Karena Akhavein, and it's my passion in life to help authors like you to move from idea to published and promoted in the most smooth, easy, and painless way. Today we're talking about 3 authors. One of them is having major storytelling woes, and let me tell you, I very quickly determined that that was happening because she was complicating things much more than she needed to. So that's author number 1. Cora. Will be talking about her smart, lovely lady making things too tough because she's so smart. She's using her brain a lot, which is great. But you can use your brain for a lot of things in writing. There are a lot of moving pieces. I'm going to help you to streamline and actually spend that mental energy on what matters. Second author was really struggling with motivating. Matt is having a hard time figuring out, why has it been so long that I've been talking about writing my book? I'm a smart guy. I've worked my whole life. I've done a lot of things in life, achieved a lot, but why is it that I can't seem to motivate myself to write, publish, and promote my book? We came up with some really fun hacks that he hadn't thought of, because let me tell you, Matt was getting these pieces of advice that you've all heard, and they didn't work for him. So I came up with some different hacks that I think are a lot more helpful. Our third author, Deirdre, was having massive issues with the idea of promoting her book. She's like, I'm going to build my author platform when my book is finished. And that's a huge mistake. But the reason she was saying that was because she was procrastinating, because her idea of what constituted doing an author platform was way too complex with too many moving pieces. So we broke it down into the simplest possible parts. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed about the whole writing and motivation and promotion process, you're going to feel so much better today. So let's get started with author number 1, Cora. She is a mom. She's an empty nester. She had a pretty big career, and now she's doing the thing that she really wants to do, which is writing a book. And she has a lot of life experience, and she's trying to put it all into her story. She's been thinking about this idea for a really long time. She wants it to be perfect. Well, that's the issue. I know that you want your book to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. The problem with the idea of perfection is it's going to freeze you more than motivate you, because you think to yourself, if it's easy, then it's not good. And if it's simple, then it's not smart. And those are wrong-headed ways of thinking. So as a writing coach, one of my favorite things to do is to help authors to break things down into the minimum value proposition that their story can possibly have. I want them to get a story spine or a primary plot that works, and then you can start adding in the complications. So let me explain how I do this. The story arc is basically that archetype of the hero's journey. It's the minimum story that works universally for people because it provides you with a satisfying plot arc and character arc that people can relate to. So what's in the story spine? You've probably heard it a million times, but I want you to listen again and really think about, does my story actually have all these elements? Because many of my clients have heard me talk about the story arc a million times, but at the end of the day, they don't have one. They don't have a story spine. They're missing some of the elements. They've gone thinking about B stories, about multiple points of view, but they don't even have the most simple story written. So let's talk about the story spine. Story spine is very simple. Once upon a time, there was. Once upon a time is your setting, time and place. Where is the story happening? Come up with a unique setting for your story. Those of you who've been around here for a while know that your setting should be kind of a character in your story. It should actually kind of carry with it some inherent tension, maybe some conflicts that come in, and maybe it's limited in some way. It's hard for your character to get out of. Perfect. So setting, time, place, and character. There was. So this tells you you need a setting, you need an initial situation, and you need a character. And your character should be compelling. How are they compelling? They have a backstory, they have strengths, they have weaknesses. Many authors, including Cora, think of the whole backstory of their character and they want to include the whole thing in their book. And guess what? You don't need to do that. You do want to know the things that matter for your story, not all of the peripheral things. So keep in mind that you don't need to know what your character's favorite food is if that doesn't matter. So story spine, number one, once upon a time, there was blank. Every day is your character's base situation. This is the world that they are living in. And spoiler alert, something about this world is not exactly satisfying. Something about this world doesn't let your character be what they need to be, doesn't let them hit their goals, doesn't feed them emotionally. It might be horrible, like it is in some books. It might be okay, but there's something about it that is something that your character needs to escape if they ever want to achieve their actual self. So every day, blank. This is something that you don't need to shove down your reader's throat, but they need to know what the initial situation is, because this gives you kind of a baseline for who your character is and what they do and what their place is in the world, right? And many times in this initial world, your character is lying to themselves in some way. There's a lie they believe, whether it's told by them or by somebody else. They are operating under some kind of a false idea or pretense or ideal that doesn't work for them. Until one day, blank. This until one day is your inciting incident. I talked about this last week. The inciting incident is that accident that happens from an outside source. A letter is sent, a meteorite falls, somebody meets somebody. It's not something that your character is doing to themselves, but it irreversibly changes their situation to where they cannot go back to the way that things were. So, until one day, blank. What's your inciting incident? It better be a strong one with a strong hook. And I'm going to be telling you about the strong hook and about the things that best-selling authors do with their story to have that minimum value proposition that's pretty valuable, that people love to read about. We're going to be talking about that right after we talk about the story spine. But until one day, blank. Because of this, blank, this because is so important. Causality in your story. Too many of you have plots where things happen. I don't care if this happens and this happens and this happens. I want this to happen because of this, and because of that, this. So we have two sections here in the story spine, because of this and then because of that. you could have multiple because of this and because of that. I want a bunch of causality that because of a decision that your character made, because of a thing that they did, things are happening, some of which are not within their control, but they're definitely going to have to learn from them and they're going to have to readjust. This creates a dynamic character arc where your character is forced to learn and grow and change. This is what causes a character arc that is satisfying for the reader. So you have this middle section, which is also called by some people rising action, right? Until finally is basically what some people call the climax. Many authors I know, they're kind of like, this is kind of embarrassing, but I really don't know how to write a climax. What is that? The climax is when all of the stuff that's been going on basically comes to a head. Decisions have to be made that nobody really wanted to make. Things need to happen that are dangerous. People need to kind of do that whole all or nothing thing. This is the end of the road. What do we do now? That's your climax. So don't think of it in terms of like, oh my gosh, I have to do this complicated thing. The climax actually comes as a logical result of everything that's been going on until now. And then after that, until finally, you now have, and since then, ever since then, this is kind of your satisfying ending. This is how the world has changed because of what happened in the climax. This is the following action to our satisfying ending of here we are in a new situation, right? So you might be thinking to yourself, this story spine is pretty simplistic. It is, but think about your back, right? Your back is straight and then you do yoga with it, right? So the story spine is the same way. Once you have your story spine down, you can bend it and twist it and play with it in different ways. So I talked about having 2 point of view characters, for example. Many of you love to do this and you get lost in the weeds. And this happened to Cora as well. She had 2 characters, she had 2 points of view. And one of those points of view, you might as well have skipped it because it wasn't very well developed. It kind of came in whenever something was happening that you really didn't want to read about character number 2. So here's the piece of advice that I gave her that I'll give you today. Create 2 story spines, 1 for each character. Complete story spines, complete character arcs. And then you can decide to figure out how to intersperse those stories, but at least you've got 2 very complete stories with 2 very complete characters to play with. And that's where you can decide, okay, where do I now interrupt my narrative? Now that's going to have to do with pacing. And pacing is one of those things that differs a successful book and an unsuccessful book. When you have no pacing, you have no heartbeat for your story. Best-selling authors, I would say that it's not just the plot that matters, it's how they pace it out. Whether it is an adventure novel or something more emotionally driven, they know how to create cliffhangers. They know how to take the reader on a journey. You take your reader on a journey when you have ups and downs, when you have different pacing, when you have long sentences, short sentences, action verbs, and moments of calm that create suspense before the big active moment, whether it's emotional or physical. This is what best-selling authors know. Play with the pacing. Vary things. Take that reader on an emotional roller coaster. So now that you understand the art of pacing, that's when you know where different points of view should go. That's when we know when you should leave a scene. That's when we know, okay, should I continue this or should I do a kind of cliffhanger for this one chapter? That is kind of an art and a science that I would say most best-selling authors have understood. But when you think about it, it's pretty simple for you to figure it out, but it's all the more simple if you haven't complicated your plot too much. So I say that the best plot is a simple plot that has just the elements you need, and then you add in the pacing, and then you add in the emotion, then you add in the details about your character that makes us care about it, and now we have so much more dimension that we can really delve into without getting lost in something that's overly complicated and that gets kind of diverted along the way. So that's really, really crucial. This is why simplicity matters. So when Cora and I talked about her craft and about crafting something a little bit more simple, at first she was very resistant. And the way that I get authors to do this is I have them take their rough draft, whatever they have, and I make them recreate an outline from what they have. And this will show you, black and white, do I have the story spine? Do I have a story arc? Does my character actually grow and change? You can't run away from it once it's in this black and white, very simple outline form. So that's what I really encourage you to do. And I just think that remember that storytelling is universal. Remember that stories can be super different, but there's some things that always work and some things that don't work quite as well. I would say stick to the things that really work and then start playing and branching out. Don't make it complicated from the get-go, especially when you're kind of new at this. And here's the most important thing that you need to do once you've kind of written this first draft of yours. I want you to go back and ask yourself, is every single scene emotionally resonant? Does every scene do something? Does every character do something? And believe me, whenever I kind of propose this sort of idea in videos on TikTok or even with my one-on-one clients, I get a lot of pushback. They're like, oh no, I love the scenes where nothing happens. Well, spoiler alert, many of the scenes that you mentioned to me as scenes where nothing happens that you really love, they're actually crafted by very good authors who have really put something crucial into that scene. For example, they've kind of built on a relationship, or they've created a decision that the character's making. So it's not a scene where nothing's happening. It's just that they've used pacing to make you think that this is kind of a lower pressure scene. But then when you think about it, you go, wow, a lot happened in that scene. So look at your scenes, look at your characters, look at everything that goes on and ask yourself, is there strong causality? Does everything have a job? Does it actually need to be there? And if not, trim the excess. And if you're thinking, well, then what are you putting in its place? You're putting emotion. So I'm not asking you to make a book that's completely spare and has nothing in it. I'm asking you to trim the excess so that you can add more emotion in there. That's really crucial. And it's something that I think at first you think to yourself, wait, this is feeling maybe too over the top with the emotion. Play with it. Play with that pacing. Slow things down, because that can be really, really rewarding for a reader to slow down dramatically and then speed up. So play with it. Let me know what you think. If you're like, I still don't see exactly how the story spine works, I still don't see all the moving parts of a plot, don't you worry. In From Idea to Publish in 6 months, I have a whole outline on how this works completely. My story architect is kind of like Save the Cat, but it's actually even more emotionally resonant. And if you do DIY author, you also get a worksheet with all of that stuff in it. So I highly recommend going to my online courses for writers.com. You're going to find all of those programs that can really get you started and help you to get out of the weeds when it comes to being stuck with a plot that doesn't work. Now let's move on to author number 2. Matt, who is having a really hard time motivating. And I kind of love clients like this, even though, okay, so spoiler alert, some clients who have a hard time motivating, they're never going to motivate because it's all in here, okay? There's so many things that I can tell an author, and whenever I was in my first kind of starting out as an author and I was having a hard time motivating, I was looking for help, and I came across the same advice time and time again. Oh, get a regular writing practice. Write at the same time every day. Well, what if I can't motivate to write at all? How is writing at the same time every day going to help? I'm not going to do it. Or use the Pomodoro method. Well, that's great, but that would mean having to sit down and actually put on a timer and force myself to write every day. Again, I'm not motivated. I'm not going to do it, right? Reward yourself for a job well done. But okay, I just told you I'm not doing it. You know, visualize your goal. Okay, that's lovely, but my goal feels really huge and I'm actually really scared. So many authors who have issues with their motivation, I get it. I've been there. I was not motivated because I didn't believe I could actually do it. And that's probably the key reason that authors don't do it, is because they think they can't. So think of the example of like, nobody thought they could run a 4-minute mile. Once somebody does it, everybody's breaking records left and right. Once you've written your first book, you know you can do it. It gets so much easier, I promise you. So what are the hacks though that actually work? Because Matt is telling me this doesn't work for me. All of this advice that I've heard, even searching for accountability, he hired me, and this is one of my clients who I saw him about every 6 months. And I was like, dude, you're paying me, but you're not actually utilizing me. But I get it, because he had other things in his life too. You have to be a little bit kind with yourself and understand when maybe it's not the right season to be writing this book, or maybe it's not the right season to be writing this book this way, or maybe you're putting to that. So first of all, be kind to yourself and be realistic. There are no hacks in this, but I do have some little hacks, but this is the most important thing, is that I want you to understand that sometimes it's okay to not be motivated. Because if you push yourself and you're not in the right headspace and you're not in the right life space, you're gonna be burnt out. And when you're burnt out, that is way harder for me to get you out of it and for you to get yourself out of it than it is if you're simply not motivated. Burnout is a whole other animal, and I like to see authors avoid that when possible. Burnout actually hurts and messes with you. So the self-compassion is super crucial, and also being a little bit more realistic. Now, I know that that's funny because as authors, we're all delusional. We all dream that we are going to be the exception to the rule, that of the 80-something% of people in this country who has a book inside of them, we're going to be the one who's going to manage to do it, and not only manage to do it, but do it well. And then we're going to manage to publish it. We're going to manage to sell it. We're going to do so fantastically. We're going to beat the odds. We are people who dream of winning the lottery all the time. And I love that. I personally like to play the lottery all the time because I played the writer lottery and I keep playing it every day. And every day I keep dreaming that my success is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because maybe that one person who's an influencer is going to find my book, love it, and recommend it to somebody else. But you know what that takes? It takes putting yourself out there. It takes promoting yourself. It takes writing books. Realistic expectations, though. I stopped thinking of writing the great American novel right now. I might write that when I'm 70. But right now I'm writing books that readers like to read. And that's my goal. So that's a really clear goal, but that might not be your goal. So making a choice and having realistic expectations. Like, if you don't have time to devote to promotion, then accept that maybe you're going to finish a book as practice, and then you're going to promote it to your friends and other people. Maybe it's not going to go so great, but this is going to pave the way for your writing career. That can be a great expectation. Or maybe, I'm just going to try to write a short story. I'm going to see where it can go. Maybe it can go into an anthology or something. It's going to pave the way. Paving the way actually is a great thing. It makes things easier for you in the future. So realistic expectations and embracing the journey. So many of us are in such a hurry. I'm with you. I'm in such a hurry too, always. I always would think to myself, wow, I wish I was successful yesterday. So forget doing it today, because it's going to take 5 years to get to where I want to be. Newsflash, it takes longer than you think sometimes, but also it takes shorter than you think to get to a certain level of satisfaction with what you're doing. So don't be too afraid of how long it's going to take. Just do it. Embrace the journey. This is something that Matt needed to learn. He needed to see that, you know what? It's not about what I did today and what I'm going to do tomorrow. It's about the road I'm on. It's about what I'm doing and learning, how I'm growing, and what's going to happen with my writing in the future. So that was really important for him to then go and visualize what success was going to mean to him. So I had him really visualize in detail what's writing success to me, because it can be something completely different for a million different people. And also, when you're visualizing what success means to you, think to yourself, okay, is this realistic for the way in which I'm actually working? So if you're visualizing success and you're like, oh, I'm at a book signing with thousands of people and I'm drinking champagne, I'm a best-selling author, that's fabulous to visualize that. What are you doing to get there? That's the harsh reality. Let's think about realistic expectations. And I'm not saying you can't get there, because you can, but it's going to take some things. And so then Matt was like, well, I don't feel like having to never see my friends in order to write. And I'm like, I don't know why that's a choice, Matt. You don't have to decide between seeing your friends and writing. Maybe you see them a little bit less, but why don't you write at 6 a.m.? Why don't you wake up an hour early? And then that way you don't have to decide to not see your friends. So whatever's important to you at this stage in life, realize that absolutely everything is a choice. You need to make the choices. They're not always easy choices. I'm not saying they are, but be a little bit more realistic when it comes to what's actually going on. Are you making excuses, or are there reasons? There's a difference. So for Matt, we found a few ways of really finding hacks that worked, because for him, the writing routine and seeking accountability, he was doing that. It wasn't working, right? So what did we do that actually moved the needle for him? First of all, we did gamification. We gamified the whole process, where I was basically giving him challenges every time that we met. I said, okay, I bet you can't write X number of words in X amount of time. And we mix it up. Like, I bet you can't dictate 10,000 words this week. We gamified it where it was just a bunch of challenges. These are things that kind of make it fun for somebody to keep engaged, keep motivated, keep creative, because sometimes it's all about keeping the spark alive. In my previous podcast, Creative Happy Hour, I talk about taking yourself on a creative date. And this is something that really, really makes a huge difference to people, because keeping that spark alive keeps you happier, which keeps your mindset in a much better place and keeps you going when the going gets tough. So Matt gamified. He found ways of giving himself points for achieving different things, and of course came up with a system of rewards. And I'm all about that. Make sure they're not unhealthy rewards, but rewards for a job well done are a great way of keeping going. Now, they don't motivate everyone. Don't get me wrong. One of the other things that Matt came up with, and I thought this was brilliant, was, the Pomodoro technique, where you're sitting there in silence with that timer on. It can be super, super high stress. So he loves music, and he was like, okay, what if I do the Pomodoro technique, but I choose a song that I think goes really well with the chapter I'm writing or the scene I'm writing, and I have to write until the song's over. That's brilliant. Make yourself a playlist and write until the song's over. And then think to yourself, okay, next song. Okay, let's write until this song's over. That is so much more fun and so much lower pressure than the regular Pomodoro, that I think it's brilliant. I think it's something that a lot of readers might want to incorporate, especially those of you who are making playlists for your book anyway. Lots of you are, and I think that's really wonderful. So try that. A great thing that we did for Matt too, he's a little ADHD like many of us. Pomodoro technique, 20 minutes, way too much. We instituted something that we call the 5-minute rule. If he's doing anything for 5 minutes and it's not working, he's allowed to stop. If he's doing something for 5 minutes and it is working, can you do it for another 5? Breaking things into 5 minutes by 5 minutes, this is something I do with a bunch of my clients actually, for whom 20 minutes seems like forever. Try the 5-minute rule. You can do anything for 5 minutes, or you can decide not to do it after 5 minutes. And here's the thing. Once you have the critical mass, once you have a certain number of words or a certain number of chapters, or you've gone so far in whatever you're doing, it is so much easier to continue, because you're like, I've come this far, let me keep going. So it's important to keep moving forward, no matter what that takes, without burning out. It doesn't matter exactly what you do to move forward. It doesn't need to be the best writing in town. It could even be character research or social media. You're moving your career forward. That's good enough for me. And don't be hard on yourself. Just take it in stride and tell yourself, I moved forward today. Tomorrow is another day, right? Even, guess what? It doesn't even take tomorrow. It can be in an hour is another hour. I can start again. I don't need to keep telling myself the same story. Finally, let's break into author 3. Author 3 did not want to start building an author platform until she'd finished her book. She was like telling herself a story, I guess, where it's going to distract me from writing. I want to focus on my craft right now. I don't want to focus on my platform. That's not my forte. Maybe I'm going to find an agent who's going to do it all for me. The publisher is going to take care of it. Well, newsflash, usually that doesn't happen. And usually building your author platform is actually more rewarding than you think. So this is what we did with Deirdre, who was really resisting her author platform. I wanted to help her to make it really simple. So just like the 2 previous authors, where we were keeping a little bit more simple, reducing expectations a little bit, not holding ourselves to some lofty ideal that's impossible to achieve, what's the minimum value proposition that you can do to create an author platform that's good enough for now and that you can keep building on? Let's build the foundations. This is a simple thing. So for Deirdre, I was like, okay, well, what's the story we're trying to tell to your target audience, and how are we going to reach them? That's all your platform is. So I had her choose just a couple different outlets for reaching an audience. She's good on Instagram. She's quite happy with images. She's a great photographer in addition to being a great writer. I'm like, great, let's focus on Instagram, right? Let's double down on Instagram, but let's also make it easier. So let's ask ourselves, what's the story I'm telling on Instagram? How do I streamline that? How do I communicate things more strongly with less? What are the colors I'm using? What are the words I'm using? Can I reuse things? And this is something that authors, they always think, I'm an author, I'm a creative, I'm always creating new material. No, reuse stuff, streamline stuff, repurpose stuff. You don't have to be reinventing the wheel every single day for your social media account. Do you know how few people see your posts? It's not even your whole audience feed. It's just a few people. So if you repurpose and reuse in unique ways, please do that. It will make your life so much easier. Batch things, create content that is easy to create all at the same time, schedule it, create series of stuff. All of these were tricks that Deirdre and I started to put into use so that her Instagram started to become something that she didn't dread quite as much, that she didn't need to spend hours on every day. Because here's the thing, so many of us do spend hours every day on our author platform, but that's because we're getting lost again with the extra. If we were just doing the stuff that was the strict minimum, posting one thing, interacting with a few followers, telling a story, making links, backlinks to, our website. I just said website because even those of you who choose to use Instagram as your main author platform, or TikTok, or Facebook, or anything else, you're gonna need a website. That is the minimum thing that you need to do for your author platform because you need a mailing list and a website. So this whole Instagram thing, that's just supporting that. You are using Instagram to attract attention, and you are telling people to go to your link in bio, and you are providing a lead magnet so that you can build your mailing list. Once you have your mailing list, you can repurpose content all the time to send things to your readers so that they remember you. You don't bother them too much, and you provide some kind of value and interest and entertainment. But you can do very minimal things, but you do need that website built that is gathering those email addresses, because that algorithm in your chosen social media platform of choice, it's going to change at some point. It's going to turn against you, and you're not going to be getting the same engagement that you were before. So if it's working for you and is sending people to your website and to your mailing list, then you're perfect. You're golden. Just streamline, and think about the story that you're telling and how you're going to keep telling it to the right people as effectively as possible. So if you know for a fact, as did Deirdre, that, hey, I've got 2,000 followers on Instagram, which isn't honorable, but just tell yourself that most publishers and agents, they want you to have 100,000 before they even consider that a big platform on a social media platform. So she had that. She had a couple thousand. Well, on any given day, she's posting something and just about 30 people are even liking it, let alone commenting. That's not awesome. That's a very small attention rate for how many followers she has and for the work that she's putting into her posts. Now, conversely, if she has a website and she has a mailing list with 2,000 people on it, even at a 10% open rate, which is pretty much to be expected, that's already 200 people who are actually reading your email, who are actually listening to what you have to say, who are actually a captive audience, who have made the effort of looking at something that you produced. So look at how much more effective that is. Like, let's say that you have a book you're promoting. Your email list is infinitely more valuable at the same size as your Instagram account or your TikTok account. And it takes just as much work, if not less. So keep thinking about streamline. This is just the most simple foundation of that. If you want to know exactly how this stuff works and how to choose a social media platform, and then build a lead magnet that's going to get you the email addresses and what to do once you have them, that's all in my course from I published in 6 months. And it's also in my DIY author workbook. You won't get the same hand-holding, you won't get the same videos, but let me tell you, if you're a self-starter, this is a smoking deal at $47. Do it. Go check out my website, creativeandwriting.com, and onauthors.com. You're going to find all the information you ever needed in this world. I hope that this episode was simple enough for you to understand these basic concepts of making your life easier as an author and getting things done so that you can get down to the nitty-gritty of writing and publishing your book and move on to the next one and the next one without burning out and driving yourself crazy. That's it. Very informal little talk today, but I think that it probably is going to make you feel very motivated and actually kind of positive about what your possibilities are, what you're able to do, and what you're going to get done. So hope you enjoyed this pep talk. If you have any questions, reach out to me at Karena@spalmorum.com. You can drop me an email. If you can't find that, you can just go onto my website. You can drop me an email from there. And I look forward to being with you again next time on the How to Be an Author podcast. Thank you so much.
If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwrite.com.